Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are pulling back the curtain on the streets you walk every single day. And, there's a hidden history there. A story about two incredibly powerful and totally competing ideas about what a city should even be.
Okay, let's jump right in. Picture the 19th century. Industry is exploding, and cities are just swelling up, becoming these crowded, chaotic, and frankly, pretty unhealthy places to live. They were a total mess. And one man looked at all this and thought, the solution is to turn city building into an actual science.
And into this chaos steps a Spanish engineer named Ildefons Cerda. He's looking at the tangled, unplanned streets of Barcelona, and he doesn't just see a problem, he sees a complete failure of reason. He actually had to coin a new word for what he was doing, urbanism, and his solution was radical. A perfect grid, designed from the ground up for health, for efficiency, and for order.
Cerda's plan for Barcelona, it was called the Eixample, and it was just this stunningly rational vision. This grid of wide, straight streets and these signature chamfered blocks. It was all designed to be airist. Now hold on to that word, we'll come back to it. But it basically means it was built to be open to air and light. This was his scientific answer to the sickness and the grime of the industrial age.
Okay, but here's the kicker, and this is really the key to our whole story today. Cerda called it a new science, but what if I told you that this dream of a perfectly rational city was actually a very, very old one?
To find its real origins, we have to go way back. I'm talking over 2,000 years. We're heading to ancient Greece and Rome to meet the original architects and philosophers who first dreamed up this idea that a city could be a perfect reflection of logic and cosmic order. So let's talk about the Roman ideal, because this is where things get really interesting. The Romans, well, they were master engineers, inspired by the Greeks, and they turned city building into a reproducible system. It was like an imperial blueprint they could just stamp across their entire empire, from Britain to North Africa.
And the guy who literally wrote the rulebook for this was the architect Vitruvius. He laid it all out, arguing that every building, every city, must have three core virtues. First, firmitas, or solidity. It has to be built to last. Then, utilitas, or utility. It has to actually work, it has to be functional. And finally, venustas, or beauty. This little triad became the founding creed of what we can call the rational city.
And you can see just how serious they were about this. For the Romans, founding a city wasn't just construction. It was a sacred, four-step ritual. It started with inauguratio, where priests would read the omens to make sure the gods approved. Then they'd trace the core axes, plow a sacred boundary, and finally purify the whole space. They were literally imposing a divine, mathematical order onto the wild landscape. But this rational ideal wasn't going to last forever.
So the Roman Empire falls, and with it, that whole grand idea of the perfectly ordered, rational city. It pretty much vanishes for centuries, and a completely different vision of the city emerges from the ashes. One built not on geometry and reason, but on faith, and a little bit of fear.
The new spiritual blueprint came from the philosopher St. Augustine. He drew this sharp contrast between the fallen, earthly city of men, like pagan Rome, and the spiritual city of God. And believe it or not, this one idea would profoundly change how cities were built for the next 1,000 years. So the medieval city was basically a fortress of faith. The rational grid, gone, replaced by these narrow, irregular streets that just grew organically, almost like vines, winding their way towards the massive cathedral at the city's heart. The order here was spiritual, not geometric. The goal wasn't efficiency, it was defense and devotion, all huddled together behind high, protective walls.
Okay, so for centuries, cities just keep growing denser, more chaotic, more jumbled up behind their walls. Then we hit the 18th century, the Enlightenment, and those ancient Roman ideals, they come roaring back. But this time, they're supercharged by a new and powerful force, science.
Thinkers of the Enlightenment kicked off what became known as the airist movement. Remember that word? Here's where it comes from. They had this radical idea that diseases like cholera were caused by vicious air. Basically, foul, stagnant air that got trapped in those narrow, dark medieval streets. Their solution? Let's bring back the wide, straight avenues of the Romans, not just because they're beautiful, but as a matter of public health, a matter of life and death.
And this wasn't just talk. You had officials like the French statesman Turgot ordering the demolition of old city walls, not for military conquest, but to literally let the cities breathe. So this is the really crucial point. The rational grid was reborn. But this time, it came back as a powerful tool of medicine and hygiene.
And that rebirth set the stage for the ultimate clash of ideas in the 19th and 20th centuries. This was a battle between two fundamentally different visions of the city, a battle that continues to define and shape our streets even today.
In one corner, you've got the heirs of Vitruvius and the heirists, people like Baron Haussmann in Paris. He famously performed what he called urban surgery on the city's medieval heart, just carving these massive straight boulevards right through it to improve circulation, sanitation, and state control. For him, the city was an efficient machine.
And in the other corner, you have the defenders of what you might call the human city. As 20th century rationalists, like Le Corbusier, took that city as a machine idea to its absolute extreme, a powerful counter-movement was already fighting back. Thinkers like the Viennese architect Camillo Sitte, they saw the rigid grid as soulless, as tyrannical. He championed the artistic beauty of the winding medieval street and the cozy Italian piazza, arguing the city should be a work of art.
And this fundamental conflict, this idea of the city as a rational machine versus a city as an organic, human-scaled home, has defined modern urbanism. You see it everywhere once you start looking. In the debate between towering high-rises and historic preservation, between the endless quest for efficiency and the simple desire for a unique human experience.
So the next time you walk outside, I want you to look around. I mean, really look. Because you're standing right in the middle of a 2,500-year-old argument. Is your street a product of that rational grid, or is it a winding, organic path? Is your city designed like a machine, or does it feel more like a home? And looking to the future, which vision do you think should win?